I've been running 2 Shadowdark campaigns for a year now and took a few minutes before recent game sessions to ask my players about their experiences. I'll dive into what I see as the most controversial element of Shadowdark and also my observations from running several 1980s adventures with the system. We'll cover the modest house rules we use and why. Consider this an extended playtest of Shadowdark. Welcome to my channel. I'm John. I'm a longtime referee of these dungeon crawling games. Before I dive in, I think some context will help. I had a professor once who we're talking about Heraclitus and the relativity of experience. Like if you're in a hot bath and get out of it, the air feels a certain way. Maybe it's chilly to you. Whereas if you're outside the house, you step in, that same air feels warm and balmy. If you're a 5e player coming to Shadowdark, you might say, oh, these OSR games are so deadly. If you've spent your gaming career playing games like this, like Basic Expert, where you die at 0 hit points, you might say, bro, can you even die in Shadowdark? So I think the context matters. Here's my player's context. My core group's been together 18 years. I've been the forever GM, and we've run several campaigns with every rule set on the screen. Well, I think one 4th edition campaign was enough for us. The sad little dungeon crawl classics in the corner is there because while several of us have owned DCC, it's criminal that I haven't fit in a dungeon crawl classics campaign in 18 years. I know the game hasn't been out for 18 years, but poor DCC. They seem to be doing so much good work over there. So most of my players come from a world where a wizard had 1 hit point and could get killed by a house cat. They're experienced players who have played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons and OSR games. And the other thing about my 2 groups, one has 6 players and the other has 5. So for instance, if you're a 5e player and you've come to Shadowdark and your group only consists of 3 people, you're going to have a much different experience than us, potentially. You potentially have a much different experience than us. So here's what I asked my players about in rapid fire. First off, what do you guys think about the magic system? I think the best quote I got from one of the players was, I hate spellcasters. I never play them, but I would actually play a spellcaster in Shadowdark. Like I thought that was really very revealing. In general, though, the people who are actively playing the Shadowdark spellcasters, whether it's wizards or priests, they say, all right, the characters are much more useful at low levels. The magic system is swingy, which they feel is quite fun. You never know if you're going to succeed or fail. When you do fail, they actually found the penalties were fun, magical mishaps and things like that. It's a good balance of risk and reward. From an XP perspective, it's very simple. They like the instant feedback. So the way I run experience in Shadowdark, if the players find something and I know it's 1 experience point or 3 XP for this particular find, I'll just declare it once they claim it. People love like that immediate, oh, wow, that's awesome. We got some experience points, instead of waiting until they leave the dungeon several sessions later. One issue I can see start to creep up is that the experience progressions are linear, but the experience itself doesn't scale the same way. So I think as we're getting past the mid-levels, we're just going to see that it takes progressively longer to level up. In terms of lethality, the players like the death timer. It creates good pressure. I tend to throw brutal encounters at my players, and so it mitigates some of that brutality. We're using a house rule I'll talk about called Enduring Wounds. In general, though, comparing this game to like the TSR games, they feel like the level 1 power level of the characters in Shadowdark is good. It feels a lot more like 5e, whereas BX is a bit too paltry. Everybody loves advancement, the randomness of advancement. So rolling on the talent table. Most of the players said, well, it prevents min-max and optimization. We don't overthink anything. And they actually like the creativity and improvisation it triggers when they get something they didn't expect. Luck. I'm going to talk about luck myself, but from their perspective, they're like, oh, it saves our hides all over the time. It's so helpful. It's a breath of fresh air in the game system. They did mention that now that we're in the mid-levels, they have a lot of luck. One of the games, we've got a bard, so he can just give out a bunch of luck tokens every day. One of the other game, the cleric has advantage on bless. Level 2 spell gives a luck token. So he's like, bless, 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 bless. He's like a luck machine gun. And the players did say, yeah, maybe luck should be a little bit rarer, but I'll talk about luck. Starting with the gauntlet, I love them. My players love them. It was like thumbs up for everyone. Keep doing it. I will probably do a video at some point about how to run a gauntlet and what I like in a gauntlet adventure, why my players love them. More to come on that. The only one that was a little controversial was the torch timer. The players agreed that it adds drama, it's dynamic. I think the one thing they mentioned was it's really disconnected from what's happening in the game world. Anyway, it forced them to play briskly. We're keeping it. And resource management, all the exploration-based old school games require you to track resources, i.e. encumbrance. Of all the systems we played, the players agreed unanimously that the encumbrance system in Shadowdark's the easiest, the best one they've used, so they love it. From a referee's perspective, I've got to talk about luck. The game rules and the dice are the reality of the game world. And we're not necessarily playing around the tabletop right now. Our games are online, but it's still this idea that when a player rolls, it's like chunk, 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 chunk on the dice and it ends. There's a finality to that and a sense of drama waiting to see what that roll is. And in a world of luck, there's no finality. Sure, there's a result, but then everybody stops and the players kind of like look at each other and they're like, are we going to accept that? Or should we spend a luck token and re-roll it? And so I feel like our games have lost, at least on the player side, a little bit of drama because of the luck token. And I don't know that I'm in love with the experience that the players are these characters in the game world. And then like, so something outside the universe rips a hole in, sticks this big giant hand into your world and says, hold on, I have a luck token. And then rewinds time and then does the action a second time. I'm a bit ambivalent about luck from that perspective. It's one side of the scale. It's eroded some of the drama and I don't love the aesthetics. On the other side though, it is a powerful resource, and resource means it's something that the players have to manage. It drives really good discussions and teamwork at the table, especially the teamwork, because everybody's invested in each other's roles and they talk a lot about like what's good for the party. If someone's making a critical role like spell casting, but they don't have a luck token, the teamwork is other people saying, oh, I can give you my luck token. So it drives really good discussions, gameplay, engagement, teamwork. It's tough. It definitely smooths some randomness. I take solace in the fact that I can throw a lot more at the players guilt-free because they got luck tokens anyway. Now, between the bard, the seer, the bless spell, players can also choose to have a luck machine at the table if they feel like they want luck to be a big part of the game. I think where I'm landing as a referee is I'm stingy. My target is to give out only 1, maybe 2 luck tokens a session max. And if the players want more luck availability, well, they can lean into one of their luck machines. Let me know in the comments, if you've been playing this game for a while, where you guys have landed on the balance of luck. I think to me, this is the most controversial part of Shadowdark that maybe sets it apart from all the other OSR type games. The other thing we got to talk about is monsters. Now, when I picked up Shadowdark, there was a lot of commentary online at the time that was, Or you can just run OSR adventures and old school adventures as is. And after doing that for a year, I dissent a little bit. I still love running and converting TSR adventures, but that's the key word. Like, it's a conversion. My advice, you always have to run either the Shadowdark version of the monster or be willing to put in some time to convert it, particularly scaling the number of attacks. Shadowdark characters are a lot more survivable and a lot tougher than TSR era characters. They've got a lot more magic. They don't die at 0 hit points. The death timer gives them a lot more survivability. So let's use an example and take a look at these two ogres. First, you have on the one side the classic BX ogre 4-hit dice. I calculated the damage per round. Think about it this way. The old school ogre is going to hit an armor class 4 in, in old school terms. Chainmail and shield is like a 4. Plate mail alone is like a 3. And using the combat tables, it's going to hit 50% of the time. Its expected damage is 5.5, right? Halfway between 1 and 10. So its damage per round is 2.75. Switch over to Shadowdark, which is using ascending armor class. If the typical armor class in party is like 15, something like that. The Shadowdark ogre will also hit 50% of the time, maybe actually a little more. But it gets 2 attacks around, and its damage is higher. Its expected damage is 7. If it's hitting 50% of the time, 2 attacks. Its damage per round is 7. So you can see the Shadowdark monsters, they hit a lot harder. And hit points in Shadowdark are flatter. Damage is a little bit flatter. But the player characters are a lot more powerful and they're a lot more survivable. And as I've played a lot more, I've really come to understand that the multiple attacks that Shadowdark creatures get as they level up, it's really important to keep the threat level high for the players. One other comment about Shadowdark monsters. When I first started, I realized these monsters are a lot simpler, let's say, than maybe Advanced Dungeons and Dragons or even 5e. But over time, I see that as a benefit, a feature, not a bug, because it reduces your cognitive load as a player, as a referee, and makes them a little easier to run in combat. So right in line with the discussion about monsters, I've converted several TSR adventures to Shadowdark. Keep on the Borderlands, Horror on the Hill. One of my groups getting ready to start the Isle of Dread. I've landed on the idea that Shadowdark player characters are probably 2 or 3 more levels above what an equivalent BX character would be in terms of power level. So you can kind of throw the book at them in some of these adventures. Now, like I said, in terms of context, your mileage may vary. Where my players are coming from, which is playing old school games extensively and having large effective parties, might be a much different experience only having 3 people. But for me, if an adventure says for levels 5 to 7 or something like that, I would say, okay, for Shadowdark, you could run that with a group that's 3 to 5. For instance, I'm considering running Against the Giants in one of my campaigns. It's like, it's a dream. I have to do it. So I'm going to start converting this one. But instead of thinking about it for character levels 8 to 12, the way it's presented for advanced D&D characters, I think for Shadowdark, you could probably run it with characters level 6 to 9. Now, this is just a hypothesis. People who follow my channel or pay attention to it, you'll get to see it here, because I'm sure when I get to that point, I'll post about the conversion process and how it's going for us. But Against the Giants is in our future, and I think it'll be for 6 to 8 or 6 to 9 in terms of Shadowdark stuff. As I was reflecting on a year of Shadowdark, I was like, what's missing in the game? Now, you can play an entire campaign in Shadowdark. That one of the criticisms I've seen online is, well, this is just a dungeon crawling campaign. So you can't really play a whole campaign with it. But we've done hex crawls, dungeon adventures, mysteries, heist adventures. You can do every kind of adventure and run a campaign. What I felt was missing in Shadowdark was this capstone quality that when you get to high levels, your characters have accumulated wealth. You want to build a castle, attract men-at-arms or an army, kind of start exerting your influence on an area. So when I was preparing for this video, this section was going to be like, wow, I really hope maybe a third-party publisher does a good job of bringing castles and mass combat into Shadowdark. In reality, I've spent some time on the Shadowdark Discord where they're talking about the Western Reaches Kickstarter, and castles and warbands have been added, the Western Reaches. Like, I almost fell out of my chair with joy at that. I know it's so nerdy, but I'm so excited to see that. So breaking news, it looks like Shadowdark will have bastions and warbands in the near future. We use a very modest set of house rules. As a child of the 1980s and playing with callers and mappers back in the day, I still always use a caller. It's a specific role that helps organize the group and keeps things moving forward. So when our party is moving from place to place, like room to room in a dungeon, or we're hex crawling over land, we always have a caller named. The next two rules have to do with the lethality of the game. So when you are at 0 hit points and you've got a death timer, the rules are silent on what happens if you get hit while you're down. Our house rule is if you get hit while you're down, that ticks your death timer around. If you get critted, it ticks twice. I think it might be the same way in 5e. So this is a very easy house rule to port over. The next one is Enduring Wounds. Enduring Wounds came out in Curse Scroll 2. It was this idea that if you go to 0 hit points after a severe injury, you might have an enduring wound, a permanent injury, at least until you get regeneration or some higher level magic. But severe wounds are not defined anywhere. So our house rule basically is if you get knocked to 0 hit points and the monster attack was a critical, or it rolled max on one of the damage dice, then that would qualify as a severe wound, and you'd have to check for an enduring wound when you're revived. So really modest house rule. And then the last one has to do with scrolls. Now, rules is written. A wizard can read a scroll and attempt to learn the spell that's in it, and it doesn't use their downtime. They just get to do it once per day. The house rule we've implemented is that if you do sacrifice your downtime, your one downtime in between adventures, we let you roll with advantage. That's it. And then this last one, Hidden Death Timer, it's not actually a house rule we're using, but as I was talking with the players about our experiences and how they feel about the game system, one of the players actually suggests we could just hide the death timer and that would create a lot more drama at the table. So we may experiment with that. If that's one any of you guys are using, I'd love to hear about it. And maybe pros and cons. So are we going to keep going with Shadowdark? Of course. We love the blend of dungeon crawling and the simplicity of the system. It has some real elegance to it. Rick over at Save vs. BS recently was talking about cognitive load and referees. And you've got so much to juggle at the game table. And I realized that Shadowdark has a very low cognitive load. So it's an absolute pleasure to run. And it's not because the game is rules light or anything like that. Maybe it's rules medium. Just a very elegant system, very simple and easy to run. And our players love it. I'm a bit ambivalent about luck tokens. Still, I'm expecting our leveling to slow down because of the way that progression works. In my quest to run old school adventures, like I mentioned, I've needed to adjust my thinking around the level of the players relative to the adventure and be diligent about converting monsters. Other than that, Shadowdark's great. And the news about castles and warbands is super welcome. Thank you, Arcane Library. If you've made it this far, thank you. You're awesome. I'll link a video here about the Caller, that role I talked about from the 1980s. Please drop a comment what you thought of this video. If you enjoy my stuff, please consider liking or subscribing to my channel. Thank you. It's appreciated. And I'll see everyone soon.